everybody. Welcome back to Reclaim You. Laura and I are here, and we're going to talk about the Olympics and athletes and eating disorders. So, hey,
Hi.
how you doing?
Yay. I'm great. I love the Olympics.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I
Me
love
too.
them. I've always loved them from a very young age. Like it was always a thing. We watched both the winter and the summer. And, you know, whenever we get near Olympics time, that Olympic theme that they play all the time, I run around my house singing that. My husband loves it. So
I love it.
Really helps our marriage.
Perfect.
Yes. Luckily, he's gracious with me.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Which is your favorite Summer Olympics? What's your favorite event or your favorite events?
I don't know. It's like every year I discover, or every time they're played, like I discover like a new one. Like, I mean, I always have enjoyed watching swimming and I've always enjoyed gymnastics. Track and field too, not particularly long distance ones. I mean, because there's no excitement till the end anyway.
Right.
But I appreciate the endurance, and the training. But like this year we started watching handball, and it's fascinating, right?
Cool.
Yeah. And like women's water polo, we were watching, women's rugby. So like, it's kind of nice to be exposed to some sports that like aren't as prevalent in the US, right? They're not as popular. Yeah. So it's been a good time so far. I'm sad that all the swimming meets are over.
Me too. Yeah. Me
Yeah.
too. I love the swim meets. They're great.
They really are. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's been fun. And then I look forward to the Winter Olympics in 2 years.
In 2 years. Yeah. And Simone Biles, she was fun to watch this year.
Yeah,
I mean, all the gymnasts are fun to watch all the time, I think, but
sure.
I was pulling for Simone.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, what a story of her own journey with mental health. And certainly too, like a story that has maybe, it's not like the typical happy ending because her last 2 events she didn't medal in.
Yeah.
She made mistakes. Like that happens, right? We're human, even at that elite level where you have stuff named after you.
She's still the GOAT, right? She's still the greatest of all time. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So like, I just, her whole story and who she is a really cool one.
That's for sure. Yeah. So Laura and I both saw on, I guess it was on Instagram, probably a lot of talk about like bodies, particularly women's bodies in the Olympics, and some diversity in body sizes and shapes. And so we thought we'd talk about it a little bit, and athletes in general and eating disorders. So yeah, let's dive into it.
Yeah. I think the thing that inspired me is actually like someone, like a young person from my past who just graduated from high school. I used to work with her. She, in high school, she was in like wrestling, right? And like shot put or track and field or something like that. And she had reposted something from I don't know if it was the main Olympics thing, but she reposted this thing, which was a quote from Ilona Mayer, who's a member of the women's rugby team. And basically she said, what was the quote? I have it right here. She was like, I do have a BMI of 30 and I'm considered overweight, but alas, I'm going to the Olympics and you're not.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, it grabbed me. I was like, damn, yeah, girl. And then like she has this whole, I mean, her whole Instagram page has been gaining followers and she does a lot around embracing your body, honoring diverse bodies, and, freely like in the body that she's in, doing the things that she wants to do. And as I was kind of like, looking at it because I was intrigued. And there's one where she talks about how all bodies matter, all bodies are worthy, all bodies are beautiful, they can do amazing things. And like truly see yourself in these athletes, meaning the Olympic athletes, and know that you can do it too. Right. And she's not like, oh yeah, you can all be elite Olympians, but like that our bodies so often like are seen as a hindrance, especially if they don't fit the mold. But that often, even in the Olympics, especially in the Olympics, you see this wide diversity of body. So like, it's just been like really cool. She had this other post too, where she's like, this is what Olympians eat. We eat carbs, carbs, carbs. She was like, fuel up, don't stay hungry. And I was like, yes, like, because if we think about one of the things that athletes, especially female athletes who are struggling with disordered eating and eating disorders, like they struggle with is under eating, right? Like they're not, it's called relative energy deficiency, right? And like this idea that we are taking in far fewer calories than we're expending, and that causes a whole host of issues. And so I loved that message of like, eat up, fuel yourself, you need it, right? And we all do.
Yeah.
We all need that fuel to keep going in whatever our day is. Even if we're not playing rugby, you know, your brain needs it. Other parts of you need it. So yeah, I was just inspired by her and started to sort of like think, because I see a lot of clients of mine who are former athletes and really struggling like with the identity as an athlete, but then like either not being able to sustain that level anymore and their bodies are changing because that level is not sustainable in the long run. Or they had experiences as an athlete where they were not supported in healthy ways. They were not, you know, taught healthy ways of being and doing. It's a lot to unpack and to sort of deconstruct after years and years and years of competitive sports. Yeah, so it kind of all goes together.
Yeah, I saw a reel, and the theme was looking at Olympians' bodies in the Olympics now in 2024, and lots of different body shapes and sizes were represented in this reel, and it was super cool to see that it wasn't just the old days of very thin white women being represented in, you know, Olympic teams or on Olympic teams. So that was really cool.
For sure. Yeah. It's, you know, we've come a long way. And also like Olympians who have come out and talked about their own struggles with like eating disorders, right? I think that's really important too, is that we understand that like even those who are at this elite level, especially those, I mean, they're very much subjected to an environment that can encourage disorder behaviors. Nowadays, I think more and more there's a lot more healthy support that's coming, you know, athletic nutrition, things like that, that is more paid attention to. But, you know, there's been athletes who've come out like Gracie Gold, who's a figure skater, coming out and talking about, and, you know, others as well who have struggled in their bodies, and some who've had to take time off from competing in order to heal. I just think it's important that we recognize that like, just because someone is an Olympian doesn't mean that they are somehow immune from all of this stuff. And that like, they're not that different from us with respect to the struggle. You don't have to be this elite athlete to be subjected to an environment of competition. And especially if you're in an environment where like you're doing weigh-ins. Or, you know, there's the artistic aesthetic sports, you know, like that are happening and you have to look a certain way, or you're expected to. There's a lot there to trigger folks. And I think it's important that we recognize that and talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even talking to people who call our practice, you know, a lot of people say like, I was a gymnast growing up, I don't really need to say much more. And it's like, well, yeah, because the pressure for gymnasts, there is this aesthetic. And yeah, it's really, really harmful. Lots of gyms are very harmful for lots of people who are interested in gymnastics.
Countless stories of coaches who from young ages are teaching basically their athletes to have eating disorders and body shaming them constantly, you know, comparing them to others. And it's a really harsh environment, and you're kind of like caught, right? You're at a young age, you've been put in there. Parents are trusting coaches. And what do you do? How do you speak up for yourself? You don't even know better often.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we could even go to just high school athletics, right? And how much pressure on young kids now to be the best and to start early and to, you know, reach these levels that, you know, often come along with disordered eating, right? Because you want to like quote unquote fit the part.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we see like the statistics even like really speak to the impact of being engaged in athletics on your risk for eating disorders. So like one of the latest statistics that I saw came out of Mass General, their women's sports center, and it talked about like the general population of the US, which I'm sure is underreported, but according to the statistics we have, like about 2% of adolescents and 1.6% of adults would be classified as having eating disorders, right? I do think that's highly underreported. But if you compare that to female athletes, that increases exponentially. So when you're looking at female athletes, up to 42%
Yeah.
could be struggling with some sort of disordered eating body image stuff. And that's dependent on like how old they are, what sport they're engaged in, the level that they're competing at. So like you just see this huge, and then also the statistics, you know, that up to 70% of athletes are engaging in some sort of disordered behaviors that could eventually lead to a full-blown eating disorder. So, I mean, it's a high-risk environment, let's be honest. It's an environment, especially if it's an environment that is focused on individual performance. Team sports, there might be more protection. But, you know, there's overtraining. There's like the question of nutrition, like we talked about. Like there's the treatment by coaches and trainers and whether or not they have your best interests in mind or it's all about the competition. So there's a lot to be mindful of, you know, if we ourselves are athletes or if we have athletes in our lives, you know, to just be mindful that they're in environments where they might need even more support, especially if they're in recovery or if they're starting to have symptoms that you're like, you know, there's something not quite right here. I think it's really important to note that that's an environment that can be high risk.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about even the UFC, right? My husband always watches the UFC and the weight cuts that happen and the intensity of the weight cuts, right? And even it being televised, it's hard to differentiate, right? Like what's healthy, what's for the sport, what's disordered, when really inherently it's all disordered, where people are cutting out everything and doing whatever they need to do to make this weight. And it's like, to what end? And what is the impact on your body and your mental health through these ups and downs? And I think, you know, Olympians and even high school sports that have weigh-ins and things like that, collegiate athletes too, they're all experiencing this.
Yeah, I witnessed a lot of that. And I think there was even like a documentary or something, but at the college level, when I was working at the college, you know, men's wrestling, because of the weight classes, like the amount of disordered behaviors, and then also like this concept of like, oh well, this weight class like you can't compete at, so we're going to get you down to this other weight class because you'll be more competitive there. And it's like, is your body supposed to be that thin? Like, and are you supposed to starve it in this way? And how the heck then do you have the energy to go to classes and be in college and then also wrestle? Yeah, it's really messed up.
Yeah. I was on the crew team in college, and where my team, we didn't have a lightweight boat, but it's similar with all the other D1 colleges who had lightweight boats, that women were cutting calories and doing whatever they had to do to make weight for these boats and coxswains and having to be small people and so much pressure for the sport. And, you know, sports and athletics are wonderful, right? They're healthy in so many ways. And this is one side of it that gets really ugly for a lot of people.
Indeed. Yeah, it's true. And we don't even always consider all the ways that, you know, like an average person might not consider rowing, being on crew, something that would be like problematic, right? But it is. Any of these sports can be. I mean, even if you think about like just the uniform that athletes have to wear often. I mean, there's always this debate about like women's volleyball, beach volleyball players. Why are they, you know, we could get into that, but like it's very revealing. Like there's a lot of body conscious, and even those of us who might just be out in public on a regular basis or go to a local gym, you see that everywhere. These very body conscious outfits that people are wearing, it's all part of the culture. You know, that has its own impact and effects. So yeah, there's just a lot. There's some wonderful, wonderful things. My dad was an athlete, and it was a huge part of his identity, and gave him a lot in life. You know, but there also is this dark side, as there is in, you know, many things that I think it's important we're aware of.
And I'm thinking too, for even like football players, and thinking about my husband and how important it was, you know, earlier in his life, like high school and then in college, how important it was to be like big and to take up a lot of space on the field, to be able to block and, I don't know, do whatever those football players do. And then when you're done with the sport and it's like, oh, well, I don't know if I want my body to be this big anymore. And then you're at this really difficult crossroads of like, well, what do I do now? The culture says to diet it away, right? And then that, right, can to flip on its head. And so really there's so much nuance to all of this.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say you can extend it beyond sports too. And I thought of this moment in my life. I was in my junior year of college and I was a vocal major and I was just in a really bad place. You know, I was suffering, just really struggling. Where am I at? What am I doing? I had depression and like I was having a lot of body image issues at a time when like I was still in what would be considered, you know, probably an average body, but to me it was huge. And I remember the one day just like sort of breaking down in my voice lesson, and my voice teacher, who had worked extensively with various opera companies throughout the world, had like worked with Pavarotti and like some major players out there. She came around and she stood me in front of the mirror and she said, look at yourself. This is your instrument. You know, because you have a larger neck and broader shoulders, you can sing in a way that other people can't sing. Right. And, you know, you're never going to have the voice that you think you should have, because there was, you know, I was in a program that liked a specific type of voice that I did not have. And that was like a real moment. Like I wish I was able to receive it then as I am today. But yeah, our bodies are instruments. And so like, you know, swimmers, you're not seeing swimmers who have these very narrow shoulders by and large, right? They are, yes. But if you're an adolescent growing up and have a broad shoulders and you're 6 foot tall, my mother was 6 foot tall. She got bullied terribly and she had body issues for the rest of her life and an eating disorder. That happens all the time, right? But like the very fact that you're in this body, it's an instrument that you can use to do amazing things that other people may not have the capacity to do at the same level. So how do we look at our bodies like as instruments for how we are in the world? Whatever our ability is, some people are very limited in their bodies, but that doesn't mean that our bodies have to be sources of shame. It doesn't mean our bodies can't participate in the world around us in ways that feel purposeful, in environments that are safe.
So for athletes that are listening, what are some things to think about?
One of the things that comes to mind is let competition be about skills. Let it be about, you know, the games, the matches, what have you. Let's not make competition about bodies or like abilities. Like I say skills in terms of like healthy, you know, like on a team, like we're going to work together so that we're all better, right? Especially if you're an individual athlete, that's dangerous. Like, do you have supportive people who are a part of a greater network, like a swim team or, you know, some sort of club that you're a part of that can sort of like support you and build you up instead of creating this environment where you're constantly being compared. And so like, yeah, competition can be healthy. It absolutely can be, but it shouldn't be the be all and end all of it. Like one of the things I often ask athletes, dancers, it's another area, is do you enjoy this anymore? And often the response is, I hate it. I hate it every day, but I don't know what else to do. And I don't know who I am without it.
Who am I without it? I was going to say that.
If you're finding that the joy that you might once have found in whatever it is you're engaged in is no longer there, that's a pretty good indication that maybe there's some stuff that you could look at. Or if you're finding that you have to go to great lengths to change your body, you know, that it's never acceptable to not win. Everything has to be at the elite level. That to me would point to maybe it would be helpful to talk to someone. Yeah. If you have coaches or parents even, right, who are like continually saying you can't eat that, like counting calories, restricting your food, you know, upping your training, like to great degrees, you know, where you're getting injuries. I mean, we've seen these statistics around like young children, more injury, then, you know, there are places you can go and people who understand, and it can be safe, right? It's not always safe to speak up to the coach, or even sometimes it's not safe to speak up to our parents because they're kind of bought into the culture too. And they trust the coaches. But there is a place like that can help you to sort of make sense of what's going on. What do I need to be concerned about? And what do I want? And then what do I need resource wise to be able to advocate for myself and be heard.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's how do I step away and find myself because I've lost myself in whatever it is that this, huge part of my life was dedicated to for so many hours and hours and hours and years.
That identity shift, I feel like, is just so hard to have your identity wound up in, a sport. And then for most of us, right, maybe not the pros, right, or the Olympians, at some point it ends, right? But for most of us in adulthood, we shift. And it's like when you don't have something to come to or to shift to, it can feel really so much like a free fall and like purposeless. And it can feel really difficult to lose that identity.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. And you are so much more than, an athlete, so much more than like what you scored or what your skills were, where you ranked or what have you. There was this article recently in CNN, like around the Olympics, that talked about like, you don't want to look like an Olympian, like don't strive to be that way. And they talked about like, this is a full-time job and the majority of people who try out don't make it, right? It's very elite.
Yeah.
So like look around at all the things that are a part of your life. I thought this was a really lovely way to think about it. Look around at all the things that you really value in your life, your friends, your family, your animals, what have you. And imagine none of that is accessible to you because all you do is train. What would that be like? Is that the life that you want?
It's making me think about the documentary about Jason Kelsey. Did you watch that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And his transition out of the game and that identity shift. And now that he gets to live in alignment more with his values, with his children and his family, and the cost that the game had on him for so many years. I thought it was really well done, actually, speaking to that. And even having the old pros there to say like, oh, that was the hardest time in my life, right? And while they're, they got paid lots and lots of money to do their sport for a long time. I think that we can all kind of relate to that, or athletes that are in this phase of life can really relate to a lot of what they shared and spoke to in that little series.
Yeah, I really appreciated too how he very clearly said, like, I don't know what the effects are going to be of bashing my head into, a D line 20 years from now, 10 years from now, even. Like, every time I step on that field, I potentially am not going to remember who my kids are, right? Like, I'm not going to have the ability to be with my kids in the way that I want when they're older. And, oh, by the way, I'm losing this time now as well.
Right.
So, and I remember his last game when the Eagles had been going so strong and then they just fell apart at the end of the season, which Philadelphia Athletics likes to do to us, their loyal fans. I will, case in point, I will direct you toward the Phillies right now on that. But he just was overcome with so many emotions because he knew it's over now. Like he knew he was retiring. No doubt they had that conversation.
Yeah.
And he knew this is it. Like, and such an important part of his life that he worked so hard for. I mean, he was a walk-on, right? Like he wasn't one of these kids who had a lot of privilege
number one draft pick, right?
He worked his ass off, and I think that's what makes him so relatable. And I think it's if anyone has not seen that, it's on Prime, I believe. I thought it was a really great, it was after, at the end of the documentary, they kind of leave you like, will he go back or won't he decides to go back for another season, and that's his last season. But it's I think it's really well done and beautiful, like that there's all this life outside of the football field.
Yeah. And there can be like joy everywhere, right? It doesn't have to all be wound up in this one thing, this one place. I think we can talk about that with bodies too, right? Like bodies, there's joy elsewhere. There's joy in different body sizes, shapes, right? Like there's joy everywhere if we can, do the work to start to see it, peek at it.
Yeah. And that like many, like to even come back to like this like idea of I can be not only joyful, but I can also be healthy in my body and it doesn't fit some stupid mold, right? That there are a number of Olympians who would, if you take the BMI, which is problematic because it doesn't take into effect lean muscle mass, like, right? So more muscular people are going to rank at a higher BMI and they're considered overweight or obese according to that chart, which is please just like set that aside. Do not let that be a measure of anything.
I'll link to a blog post that we have about the BMI being bullshit.
Yeah.
In case anyone wants. Yeah. You should read it, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, do. And that's what I loved. I think that's what caught me so much with that quote from Alona Mayer is like, holy shit, like you go, girl.
Yeah.
You know, like she's like, yeah, and I'm going to the Olympics and you're not, right? And to just like and to see this Olympian who is just with joy, like
Yes.
in Paris, you know, dressing in fancy things, but then also goofy. And like she has this one where she's like, it never looks nice when someone's trying to get out of a beanbag. And it's hilarious because like, I mean, it would like most of us when you're sitting on a floor in a beanbag and you're above a certain age, it's not easy.
It's not easy. You don't just pop up anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. And I just love the realism. Like, and I think that's where I think she is speaking to people, and that this young person who's 18 like had shared that about her. It's where Jason Kelsey, I think, has spoken, you know, to people because he as well, like he does not fit a mold either. And he readily talks about his body size and like embracing this body that he's in. And yeah, so I think like there's really wonderful sources, more and more, not just pockets, but places in athletics at all levels where we start to see, oh, wait, the same diversity is found there. So, I mean, enjoy the Olympics.
Yeah,
like,
enjoy
you know,
the last part of it.
And take in all of the diversity and the beauty of that diversity. And yeah, and then, and, you know, and if it inspires you in any way, shape, or form, you know, my hope is that that inspiration is that of, you know, challenging yourself to strengthen your whole self. Right. Because athleticism at their level and at many levels, like there's a mental component to it. Yeah. We could do a whole thing about mental health in addition to like eating disorders being part of that. But there's more.
There's so much more. Yeah. That all kind of like feeds into each other.
Yeah. But you don't need to be standing on a podium with a medal to have an amazing time playing sports, being part of a team. You don't have to be the best. Hell, you don't even have to be good in some places where it's like really safe to go and just play. Right. Be a kid again, play. I think I brought that up when we talked about movement last season. Yeah. So, and it's okay to challenge yourself, but within reason, right? And have those safety nets in place, have those guardrails, if you will, you know, have those people in your life who, if you're taking it too far, you know, you can trust are going to call you out on it.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we hope everyone enjoys the last quarter of the Olympics, since it's only a few days more when this comes out.
Yeah. I think it's over Sunday.
Yeah. All right, everybody, enjoy. And we'll be back next week for another episode. So until then, take good care.